6PR, where you don't miss a thing.
It's 25 minutes away from 6 o'clock here on 882 6PR. I think it might be time to have a chat to John Brodie from Vim Sustainability. G'day, John.
Oh, good afternoon there, Lord Jason.
Thank you very much, John. It's did you do a curtsy when you said that?
I'm kneeling on the floor
Fantastic.
with a sword over my shoulder.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we can continue this conversation in that case, John. It's good to have you on my program, Lord Jason David Jordan's program. What did you want to talk about today, assuming that I approve it?
Well, I'd like to talk about, I'd like to talk about where we're going in the future with the way that we're running our communities, the way that we're designing and building our houses, our facilities, our offices, because I think there's a major shift coming, and I'd like to explore that shift.
All right, let's do it. I approve, but I quite like the direction you're heading in there as well, because I'm starting to hear lots more conversations from people who, they want to either retrofit their house to be more efficient, or if they're planning on building a new one, it's actually coming from them, not from the designers or, whoever's building it for them. They are the ones that want their household to be far more efficient.
Look, I agree. I think that's definitely happening a lot more. We certainly are getting a lot more inquiries on the domestic scale about how can I improve my home, what can I do to minimise the running costs, improve my footprint on the environment. The key is, the first thing that people have to understand is they must make a commitment to doing something about sustainable design or sustainable operations in their home. Because remember, their home is a business.
Yeah, but it's going to cost me money, John.
Possibly not. If we can get an agreement on what people consider to be comfortable, then we can expand the parameters of what we're dealing with in our homes. The biggest costs in homes, the two biggest costs in running in home electricity bills, are generally lighting and air conditioning. Now,
but what about, for example, at my house, I've got no refrigerated air conditioning. It's all evaporative.
Yeah, now evaporative is a good option, but at the same time, if you're trying to achieve 22.5 degrees, which is the magical temperature that people think they're all going to be comfortable at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, then your evaporative cooling is still going to cost you money. Whereas if you can look at, implementing some sort of regime where you use the heating and cooling in your building only when it's at those peak times, say above 30 or below 20 or 18, then you will have a massive amount of time during the year in the Western Australian environment where you can actually survive with a natural ventilation solution, and that's going to reduce your running costs massively.
John, I've historically worked in quite a lot of the big buildings in the Perth CBD, and one of the unfortunate things about modern buildings is that you can't open the bloody window.
Oh, look, it's the bane of my life, and it's something that we're seeing a big shift here over on the East Coast, and certainly in Europe and in parts of America with similar climates to us, where natural ventilation, people being able to open windows. I know it sounds bizarre that you can actually open a window. Hey, you can open a window now. It's 2011. We can open a window and cool the building. I know that sounds crazy, but that is what is happening. There's a great shift towards the value of reducing running costs, reducing carbon, and actually getting a better level of comfort. How many people in your air-conditioned houses, schools, buses, whatever's air-conditioned, how many people are actually comfortable? Someone's always going, oh, it's too hot, it's too cold, oh, move over here, I don't like the air blowing on me, I like the air blowing on me. There's no panacea for comfort. It's such a personal, subjective thing.
And that's right, because even with trains and buses here in Perth, I don't know what it's like in the eastern states, but here, the modern innovations have been that we, again, can no longer open the window.
That's right. And therefore you have no control over your environment, so therefore you will, research shows, tolerate a much lower range of temperature if you don't have control over your environment.
Yeah. And I mean, not only that, the air quality, when you're talking about a building that is refrigeratively air-conditioned, inevitably becomes drier. And I would swear as well that being in that kind of environment where it's all just so locked down, I reckon it spreads germs more.
Look, 90% of our time is spent indoors. And the CSIRO and the EPA in America, the Environmental Protection Authority, both have a lot of research massive amount of research that shows, in many cases, the internal environment is up to 90 times more toxic than the outside environment.
Whoa. Okay.
You know, all of the emissions from our carpets and our Formica tables, our Laminex tops, our paints, our computers, the stale air, the CO2 from our body, the noxious emissions from our body, all of those things add up to, I know people find it hard to comprehend, but the internal environment, unless you naturally ventilate it and freshen it all the time, can become incredibly toxic.
So you're recommending basically a return to basics?
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a really good way of putting it. Return to basics, because if we want to do something about the cost of our energy bill and the emissions in our environment, the first thing we need to do is to re-look at the way that we heat and cool our buildings. Now, I'm not saying don't air condition your building, because in many cases, you know, if it's 45 degrees outside, natural ventilation is going to struggle, and so will an air conditioning system. But at least you could look at 50% of your year being able to be fresh and cool from the natural ventilation. Now remember, natural ventilation, for instance, can cool the body. Airflow across the body, stand under a ceiling fan, for example, has a very significant impact on the perception of cool and the way that you feel. So in the tropics, people have ceiling fans because it helps cool the body. So therefore, airflow and air movement, we believe, is coming back. It's coming back to become a much greater part of the way buildings are designed.
Oh, look, John, I can certainly see it. I was up in Indonesia about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, and certainly most of the places I went to didn't have air conditioning. They were just a really great open design with very few windows and doors and walls, and some very slow-moving but large ceiling fans.
Absolutely. This is the sort of what we call climatic response to climate responsive design. So if we design for the climate that we're in, which unfortunately in Australia we haven't done very well, then you don't need to do as much heating and cooling of your building, because it's actually working with the climate, using the climate to actually help cool and heat your building.
And that's going to save you a stack of money on electricity, surely?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And some of the work that we do now is involved in changing the shape of the building to encourage airflow through the building using pressure differences on the facade of the building, of the house, of the office or whatever. And that's an area that we're finding getting a lot of interest, because that brings this cost issue in. There's no extra cost. If you put a window there instead of there, the cost is the same. But if you make it work with the facade of the building so it increases pressure or decreases pressure, airflow is increased into the room.
John, you're from an organisation called VIM Sustainability. If any of our listeners wanted to find out a bit more about what you do, and particularly if they're in the corporate sector and they're looking at improving things, how can they get in touch?
We have a website, www.vim.net.au, and they can get onto that website and see our contact numbers on there, or they can call up you guys, or they could send me an email at info@vim.net.au. So it's quite easy to find me. If you Google my name, you'll get me anyway.
John Brodie, vim.net.au. John, thank you so much for chatting with us this afternoon, and can we have another chat with you next week?
Look forward to it. I hope so.
Brilliant, mate. Thanks so much for joining us today. That's John Brodie there. And if you want to get in contact with John, probably the best way to do it is to pop along to the website, vim.net.au. It's about 16 minutes away from 6 o'clock. Up next, we'll have a chat with Ted Bull and find out what's happening in his program tonight.